where we're counting bodies coming in the door. A quorum, right at 4 o'clock, we did. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Committee of the Whole meeting. Well, June 1st. It is not officially summer, but it is meteorological summer, according to this is a call to order, and the first item is to approve the agenda. We have one item on the agenda, so it's not wasn't a separate debate, but I've been reminded we will vote on it. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? It's unanimous. But now we're into the approval of the minutes from May 18th, 2022, the Committee of the Whole. I have to say, those minutes were incredibly detailed and covered every table with exactly detail, more detail than I remember actually talking. Molly, you reminded me, so I'm impressed. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
All right. Take that back. Is there another motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. Second. Next. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. So we're on to our one meeting item, except we're going to just have one little thing in before we do that. First, I want to say, oh, okay. Well, not. All right. Well, why don't we'll wait. I want to just call out the folks who've been working on this plan, and it's council members, and the work group with chaired in part by Councilmember Chandler and others, building upon work from the Citizens League. And I think it's really an important time. We kind of promised it by May. Okay, June 1st is nearly May, really. We're only 6 hours, 12 hours late. But it is really important to get it right. And going through the substance of this, it's pretty detailed. I think that the important work now is how we implement it and how we are actually in the search process, which is the one thing I want to describe just briefly. We're in the process of searching for a new police chief. We have an interim chief who we wanted to kind of talk about today, but we're going to hold on to that. Is that right? Okay. And but just for everybody's information, we will have more of a conversation about the search process going forward. But we have an RFP out for a recruiter firm, and we hope to solidify that in a minute. See. Nothing to say? Yeah. So I've been stalling to make an introduction. And I did a really good job. Let me turn it over to our regional administrator, Mary Bucky.
Thank you. Committee members, as I previously said by email, we have a new interim chief. As you're aware, Eddie Frizzell left the Metro Transit Police Department to become a Minnesota U.S. Marshal. So I want to take this opportunity to introduce Rick Grates, who I have been appointed to interim chief. So interim Chief Grates was previously a captain for our Metro Transit Police. He joined the department in 2005 and has worked in patrol, light rail safety, and investigations. During his tenure, he's been recognized on numerous occasions for his dedication to duty. Selected the Transit Police Officer of the Year in 2008, awarded 7 Medals of Commendation, 1 Chief's Award of Merit, and a St. Paul Police Chief's Award of Excellence. He's also completed the Chiefs Leadership Academy, the Leaders in Police Organizations program sponsored by the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and a School of Police Staff and Command at Northwestern University. He's also a husband and father of 2 adult children, whom he enjoys walleye fishing, golf, and live music. So I want to thank interim Chief Grates for his willingness to take on this role and introduce him to you as council members as we start our national search for a new police chief.
Sometimes I talk too much, sometimes I talk too little, but I appreciate the opportunity that the regional administrator's given me and the backing that you all give us at Metro Transit Police. And I look forward to taking on this role and continuing what we're doing now for recruitment and retention and making Metro Transit a destination for people pursuing the police career. And I also am looking forward now post-pandemic, at least in my tenure, to really building on engaging the ridership and system safety and security and getting back to meeting with our employees in person to person also throughout the system. So we have a lot of work to do, but I'm looking forward to the challenges and just really appreciate it. As far as being a father, my oldest daughter just finished her master's degree in social work, so I told her we could probably put her to work, helping us with a few things, but no pun intended when I have another younger child in school right now too, and it was kind of neat being an empty nester for a while, and now they're all home for the summer, so just looking forward to doing this job and spending some time with my family in between. So, thank you all.
Well, Chief, please sit down. Thank you, by the way, and it's an honor that you taking on this important work. When you talk about safety of our transit experience, it is really that customer experience that, this is one of the most important elements. Appreciate your taking that on. Do you mind just introducing your team, the Metro Transit Police, who are here with us?
Sure. I know pretty much most of them, right? This is Sergeant Mike Lubner. He's runs our RTIC unit, our Real-Time Information Center unit that has been a great pilot project and proof of concept that works very well. And he's the one that carried the torch on that and got it set up. And we're very appreciative of the funding we got for that because it has really helped us clear some big cases. And I hate to even dwell on the fact that we had that homicide here around the corner, but because of the work of folks in Sergeant Lubner's group and in our investigative unit, we had that thing boxed up and done in literally 24 hours. So it's really a success story. This is Carol Lafleur. She is in our community outreach unit. She's busy all the time and tries to check in and let us know what's going on, but she really has a good pulse on the communities that we serve, and really thankful for the work she does. Who else do we have here? I'll start in the back. Lieutenant Salah Ahmed, he is one of our evening watch commanders. Basically holds things together in the evenings and makes sure we get resources to where they need to be on a daily basis, and he's heavily involved in other duties that many others, quite frankly, haven't stepped up for. So commend him for all the stuff that he gets involved with to help out our organization. And Sergeant Kadra Mohamed here is in the front. She is in our homeless action team. I could pretty much say the same thing about her as I did with the lieutenant. Just involved in so many different things that it would, I'm actually kind of ashamed I couldn't ever list them all, but her work is recognized and noted all over, between all of our peer agencies in the area that we serve. And I don't think I missed anybody else here.
Well, I really appreciate that. We're going to hear a PowerPoint and ideas, but it really is the faces of the people themselves who I know are actually on the front lines getting it done. So that's helpful, and I appreciate your all being here with us tonight.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you. And with that, Lesley. Lesley's the one.
And I'm actually going to invite my co-presenters to go ahead and have a seat up here, make her a little bit more seamless of a transition when we get to that. So we all presume Greg's pulling up the PowerPoint. But Chair, council members, good afternoon. My name is Lesley Kandaras, and I work at Metro Transit as the Chief of Staff. They'll introduce themselves later, but I am joined by the Pam, Steffen, Steve McLaird, and Sergeant Mohamed who are going to help highlight some of the action items that are in the plan we shared with you. But we're really here today to update you on the progress we've made since the conclusion of the police work group's work in late February to develop an action plan. It's still in a draft stage, and we're really hoping after we walk through the highlights of it that we can have some conversation and answer your questions and really hear from you. So just to give you a sense of our agenda tonight, we will start with an overview. I'm actually going to take a couple steps back and just put this in the broader context of the police review work that's been going on for the last couple of years. And we'll have Pam and Steve and Sergeant Mohamed help highlight some of the items in the draft action plan, but hopefully you had an opportunity to see the full document. We won't walk through every piece of this today, but it was posted along with the slides for this afternoon, and even if we don't touch on an item that you saw in here that you want to discuss, hopefully there'll be plenty of time to get to that this afternoon. And again, after we walk through our piece, we really want to open it up for a conversation and get your feedback on, as policymakers, are we hitting the mark? Are we addressing your concerns and interests? And so we have a couple of questions to seed conversation, but I think we'll have a lot of time at the end to really hear from you. So just to get started, before we jump into the plan, I just want to acknowledge that we have a pretty large project team that came together expressly for the purpose of putting this plan together. Our co-executive sponsors are the general manager and the police chief, but we have representatives from several departments across Metro Transit. And in fact, a lot of them are here today, and I don't know, Chair, would it be okay if I asked them to stand just to give you a sense? So if you're part of the project team, can you just stand so people know how many here are involved in this work? And this isn't everyone. We had over 24 people involved in this process, but thank you. It's just really important for us to share with you that we really are doing this as all hands on deck work. It's really going to take a lot more than any one department to move in the direction we need to move. So again, I wanted to start by kind of taking a step back and putting this current action plan draft in the broader context. And as I think you're all well aware at this point, there's really been a few phases to this work. The first phase is the Citizens League deep community engagement, the transit safety conversations that concluded last summer. The second phase was the work that the police work group did beginning late August and continuing through February before sunsetting and providing their recommendations to you back at your March 2nd Committee of the Whole meeting. And so today we're on the red box, the action plan development. And we'll talk more about this when we get further into the presentation. But just as a reminder, part of where the work group left off in late February, early March, was tasking Metro Transit to go back and take the high-level vision that was provided and really try to flesh it out with concrete action steps. And that's really what we're here to share with you today. And just again, as a refresher, the Citizens League work really got started shortly after the murder of George Floyd just over 2 years ago. In June of 2020, Chair Lesley publicly committed that the Metropolitan Council was going to review the Metro Transit Police Department, looking at policies, practices, and relationships relating to transit safety and the experience our customers have on the system. And that sparked the Citizens League project. They, over the course of a year, through planning, through surveys, through facilitated conversations, engaged with over 1,000 people to really get a sense of what safety on transit means. And some of the key things you've heard before, but again, there was really a clear distinction made in that work between a perception of safety and an appearance of safety and the reality of safety, and how much of what we're contending with are perceptions and behaviors or conditions that are leading our riders and our employees to feel unsafe. Certainly they found and documented that passenger behavior impacts safety. One theme too, and we're hearing this in addition to the Citizens League's work as well, but the people who have continued to ride throughout the pandemic report that having fewer riders overall is leading to a sense of, or less sense of safety as well. But fundamentally, I think one key point from the Citizens League work is the fact that they really identified all these different factors that affect one's sense of safety, and it is so much more than enforcement and policing alone. It's the conditions of our waiting facilities. Are they well lighted? Are they well maintained? Are our vehicles cleaned? You know, are people experiencing other riders harassing people based on gender, race, or other really negative experiences? And so part of what the police work group picked up on in the second phase of this was really taking that holistic look at the various conditions and factors that affected one's sense of safety on transit. So the second phase of this work, again, was the establishment of the police work group. Last August, the council established a subset of the council, initially 8 council members, to serve on the police work group. The charge was really to take what was learned through the Citizens League work and supplement that with additional information from employees, from other partners. Councilmember Chambliss led that as the chair, and several of you obviously were on it as well. The group ended up meeting for about 6 months. It had about 15 meetings and concluded at the end of February, really laying out this high-level vision for what public safety on transit looks like. And so I'm just going to briefly kind of walk through what those recommendations were. So for each vision statement, the work group also provided a recommendation, in some cases multiple recommendations. If you looked at the action plan, I'll just point out that the rightmost column in the tables is our attempt to map the various action items we're developing to one or more of these recommendations. And in some cases, some of the steps we're planning to take really would, we think, help advance some of more than one recommendation. But as you can see for this first vision statement, the recommendation was to provide a safe, consistent, and quality experience for all buses, trains, and facilities. The second vision statement is really around how we partner with other jurisdictions, other organizations. It also called on us to continue efforts to pass administrative citations language. And then the third vision, I won't read through all 4 recommendations, but really a common theme here is about accountability and reporting enough information so you as policymakers can know how this work is progressing, kind of the current state of safety on our system, but also committing to making sure we're evaluating our policies, practices, and procedures in a continuous way to understand the impacts they're having on people. So now I'm going to focus really on why we're here today, which is to give you an update on what's happened since the work group sunsetted back in late February or March. As I said, we've had a large team of people working to put together a draft action plan. We really did that work in March and April. Beginning in May, we started taking the action items out to people who had been involved in the first 2 phases of this work. So that included internally to Metro Transit, really circulating it among Metro Transit staff, with a priority on frontline employees. It also included reaching back out to people who had been involved in the Citizens League work and the police review work as well. And so now, again, we're in the red box. We're coming to you today when we feel that there's some content here, some shape to the plan, but it's not fully baked, and we really want today to be an opportunity to hear, again, as policymakers, what are your interests in this work and where are we not quite hitting the mark yet? Ultimately, we feel incredibly urgent about this work and are really trying to stay on track to be at a point where we can say this action plan is in place and we're implementing beginning in Q3 of this year. And I think saying that, the action plan will never be done in many ways. This is continuous improvement work. The more we do this work, the more we're going to learn, we're going to evaluate it, we're going to continue engaging with people to understand, is it working, is it not working? So in one sense, this will always be a really fluid plan, but nonetheless, we want to have it in shape where you as a body can really endorse its direction heading into July of this year. Before I get too far down this, I just wanted to note that Metro Transit is not the only transit agency in the country really struggling with public safety. And earlier through the Citizens League work, I mentioned this finding that riders who are still riding with us are reporting fewer people in the system are making them feel less safe. We're also hearing that people are choosing not to ride because they don't feel safe. So we're kind of caught in this paradox where to increase ridership, we need to improve safety, but to improve safety, we need to increase ridership. And this slide is really just to note we're not the only ones facing this, and certainly we continue to look at what our peers are doing and hope to learn from them. But I think nobody has really found the the magic formula to fully resolve this issue. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on process, but just to give you a sense of how we've spent the last couple months. Again, we formed this cross-functional team with the chief and the general manager as our executive sponsors. Our first task, the people you see in this room and others who aren't here today, was really to take the work group's recommendations and to look at the work we're currently doing and saying, you know, what do we already have in place, or what are we on the brink of investing in or starting that already aligns with this direction? So we did that homework first to really understand what's our starting place. And then we began to identify gaps and really more opportunities of where we think within Metro Transit's sphere of influence or control, there's more we can be doing to improve outcomes. Throughout this, we've been keeping an eye on what our peers are doing and kind of looking into other practices to help inform our idea generation. And kind of the piece of this that we'll touch on today, but I think is part of what we need to tighten up after this conversation, is really how are we going to commit to reporting back to you, to our employees, to the public, how we're going to measure performance and track progress to plan. And I'll actually get to this next point about stakeholder engagement with this slide. So I mentioned earlier that as part of doing this work, we wanted to honor the work that had already been done on engagement, that the Citizens League did, that the police work group did, but we also wanted to kind of validate our direction with people who have been involved in this work over the course of the last couple of years. So within Metro Transit, this took place, we had a quite extensive employee engagement effort, and I want to use this as an opportunity to recognize Drew Kerr, our interim senior manager for communications, who really spearheaded an effort to get us out to every garage, rail facility, public facilities facility. We went to police training and services. We really got out and had a lot of conversations with staff who are on the front lines of dealing with our public safety struggles every day. We supplemented that with a survey, and overall, we believe we contacted or been engaged with over 500 employees. So there was a tremendous response to this work. I think we heard a lot of frustration, we heard fear, but we also heard a lot of passion for addressing this issue, and a lot of people were really willing to be part of the solution. We also reached back out to people involved in the first phases of this, and I'll recognize Michelle Fury for her efforts on that, really making sure that people who have been part of the Citizens League work, people who came and testified at the police work group, and others who were part of those discussions from outside the organization knew where we were with this effort and had an opportunity to comment on the draft plan. And finally, I'll note we also presented in April to the Equity Advisory Committee, both to give them a progress update, but also ask how do they want to be involved in this work moving forward. And we just had that same conversation with the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee today. I think much like our employees, the advisory committees really asked a lot of questions about the mental health crisis that our region's experiencing and how we're training our employees to navigate that, and what more we can be doing to support getting people connected to the services they need. There was a lot of interest in training and getting more non-sworn personnel on the system. And I'll also note the Equity Advisory Committee said even the fact we have a police department and use the word police can be traumatizing in some communities. So we really got quite a span of comments from our advisory committees as well as other stakeholders in this. And I'll just note that I should have explained what these pictures are, but when we went out to each of our facilities at Metro Transit, we came out with these poster boards. So the one on the left is saying, which actions do you support? We are really talking to people and saying, you know, if you could only do 2 or 3 of these things, what should our top priorities be? And then we also came with a blank poster. You know, what actions are we missing? We didn't want to presuppose we had already discovered the full universe of potential action items. So those are really the ways we were engaging employees in this. So finally, you've heard me talk quite a bit, and I'm going to transition to the other people sitting over here to really get into the meat of this. At this stage, we're organizing the draft plan into 3 broad areas of work. And Pam, Steve, and Sergeant Mohamed are just some of the people who are going to really have a leadership role in moving some of this forward. So I thought it would be helpful to have them directly preview some of the items in the action plan. Again, we're not going to talk about every single one in here, and certainly if there's one you saw in the broader plan that we're not touching on, we want to come back to that. I'll just say that in each of these cases, because these are cross-functional areas of work, the person presenting it might not be the expert on it, so we may want to phone a friend in the audience depending on the question and item, but that's why we're all here today. So I actually want each of you to just introduce yourself and then go. But
Sure.
I'm gonna go to your slide.
All right. My name is Pam Steffen. I have been with Metro Transit for 33 years. I am the manager of customer relations, lost and found, and overall customer experience for Metro Transit. Some of you probably know me and have been in contact with me, writing letters and stuff for you. It's been a lot of fun to help you with that. So I'm glad to be here. Super passionate about just making everything better and improving on the system. So excited to be here. All right, so I am going to get started here. So my section is improving conditions on the system. First, I want to say that the moment in time that we're in is really critical to this work. For being a long tenured person, and others here like Steve and others back here, been here a long time. And we're used to, solving problems, but the problems that we have today are so much different than what we've experienced in the past. So we are really having to dig deep on digging out some of our old tools, but then finessing them, trying to run pilots on certain things, not knowing if they're going to work, because we've never been in this situation before. So some of the work that I'm going to talk about, we have been working on for quite some time. Some of it we haven't started yet, so it's kind of all across the board. And it's outlined in the draft plan that Lesley put together and that you guys have a copy of. So we'll get started. And I have some examples of some of those action items. I'm not going to cover all of them, but we'll try to hit them. The first one here is, and actually it was number one when we did employee engagement, is that we love our police department. We want more of them. We would love to double them. No, they didn't say that, but we love them so much, and because we are short in those resources, we miss them dearly. And so we have been working for quite some time to hire and retain more full-time police officers and community service officers. But quite frankly, as you know, the environment that we live in, there not many people might want to be police officers anymore. So it's tough out there. And so the police department is working closely with the HR department to really fine-tune a strategic plan on hiring. What is the right bonus to give, our new hires? Do we need to offer a retention bonus? Do we need to retool our training so it's quicker, faster? And how do we keep that in line with all of the other agencies throughout Minnesota? I think at one of our internal meetings that we had recently, it might have been Chief Grates who said, do you realize that both Minneapolis and St. Paul have interim chiefs? So everybody is looking for a chief. Everybody is looking for resources. So it's not an easy time that we're in. As far as our CSOs, some of the work that we've done about looking, actually Chief Grates folks, the hiring folks, is that there are some schools in the Twin Cities that are actually closing their police programs or combining them with other programs because there's not a lot of folks signing up for them. So that also is a challenge for us. So what are we going to do about that? Well, we've got a couple solutions that we've never tried before, but we're going to try it. So we are looking at increasing presence on our system by I'm not sure that this is the name we're using, but by using transit ambassadors, kind of non-sworn personnel. Upon the research that some of these folks did during this work, and then others, what we have found is that other transit agencies, not only do they have police departments, but they also have transit ambassadors who are out on the system, making sure the customer experience is perfect, checking on conditions of facilities, helping customers with fares, etc. The other thing that agencies have done is they've actually contracted with security firms. And so that is something we are actually doing right now. There is a letter RFP out there on our website. Just today, we had a pre-proposal meeting with some potential vendors for security. And what we are looking at doing for the short term before we go out for a long-term request for a proposal is to hire security for our Lake Street and Franklin stations 24/7, 2 officers per station. They are unarmed. They will have handcuffs and chemical agents, but that's what we're looking to do, hopefully. Not sure if we'll get any proposals. Hopefully we'll have them on board sometime in July. And then the full RFP, we hope to have a vendor and execute that contract sometime in September. But we're working on that really hard. So those are kind of the top 3, and we're pretty excited about it. Again, we haven't done transit ambassadors before. We haven't done security before. Others have, and we're gonna try it because we have to improve. We have to do it some way, somehow. All right, another fun one for everyone is our code of conduct. We are looking at refreshing our code of conduct. The signs that we have on board our trains, our buses, and that some of our stations inside of our facilities, it definitely needs a refresh. What we're asking the general public to do, is that what we still want? Has it changed? So we really have to look at that. We're hoping to do that work over the course of the summer. And then we'll come back to you with what our recommendations are, and we're hoping that you'll endorse those to see if they fit what we're all thinking. The other thing here is expanding real-time monitoring cameras in real time. So you folks met Sergeant Lubner. And the Arctic is what we call it. Always love abbreviations, but it is amazing to me what they do. Chief Grates, mentioned that they really helped solve the recent homicide adjacent to here, but they have done so much with those cameras. It's truly amazing. They can give example after example. So it's definitely been worthwhile to have that group. They're amazing. So we are looking at, in addition to that, so all of our light rail vehicles have the real-time cameras that the Arctic folks are able to hone in on and view. And then along with our facilities, the next steps for us is to have that ability to do that on board our buses. So that is in the works and in process. I believe Brian Funk, you oversee that project right behind me there. So the other thing that we're working on is looking at reviewing our late night service, reviewing our facility hours. I have a great example of our facility hours. Brooklyn Center Transit Center. It used to be open 4 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. We recently renovated it. It's gorgeous. However, with the time span that it was open, there was a lot of time for people to hang out and have fun and really do some significant damage to the work that we did. In an effort to see if we can detour some of those actions, some of those damages, and because of our resources, our lack of resources, we've moved those hours to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And so far, things have been going really good. And so this is kind of a pilot program. Never tried this before, but let's try it to see if it works. And maybe it'll be something that we use, at Chicago Lake Transit Center or Uptown Transit Center. Related to that I haven't mentioned, is Metro Transit has a Customer Experience 360 project that myself and several of us here lead. And what that project is really honing in on some of our top locations that are high boarding locations, but also high calls for service, not customer calls for service, but also police, proactive service. So those 6, we're actually focusing on 6 locations. Those 6 locations are Lake Street, Franklin, Central Station in St. Paul, Brooklyn Center Transit Center, Chicago Lake, and Uptown Transit Center. Through metrics from the police department, through customer feedback, through high boarding locations, and public facilities feedback, that's how we came to those 6 locations. They need the most attention just because of what is happening. So this group, we have been out doing field visits, taking note of everything that we need to do short term to make these facilities a good customer experience. Some of those things might include trying out different things besides replacing glass every other day. We might replace it with these gorgeous aluminum shields that we're using on Orange Line. So we're really making a concerted effort to make a laundry list of short-term items that we can do to improve the conditions. That, in conjunction with our supplemental security coming along, we'll do that simultaneously so that we don't improve something only to fix it again. So it's a lot of great work that a lot of folks are doing on that. And it has been happening, I think we started like late November. So kind of prior to the action plan really going under draft. The other few things we want to talk about is under Steve McLaird's group, Dave Hansen, who is an Assistant Director of Field Operations, along with Steve and Donathan and your other staff. They are really taking a hard look at what staff do we have out in the system, that are out in the field, because there is safety concerns for our own employees. And what they're trying to do is figure out who is where when so that we can support each other as employees, but also help out our transit police in helping out the resource issue that they have. One of the other things that includes is like doing facility checks. How is the conditions of this facility? Your staff is coordinating with public facilities, TBM technicians who are out in the field, TIC folks, a whole group of people so that we can support each other as employees and hopefully be out there at the same time. So there's safety in numbers, if you will. I think lastly, I think I'm almost done. We are looking at piloting at certain times 2-car trains instead of 3-car trains. So our ridership on Blue and Green Line is coming back, but it's not nearly what it was before. So we're thinking at piloting out the 2 cars instead of 3 cars, so that because the ridership really seems to be towards 2 cars and not 3 cars. So there's a lot of behind the scenes things that we can do with lack of resources, mechanics and such, that if we're putting out less trains at certain times, then we can kind of, I guess, move our resources around so we can fix things more promptly and stuff like that. So that may be coming, that's in development. And then lastly, champion shelters or champion facilities. It's made up, this is a committee that we have internally that looks at bus stops, mostly bus stops where there is high feedback from police, high feedback from customers that it's not a great place to be. And some of the things that we have done to mitigate non-transit customers using shelters or bus stops as kind of hanging out areas is we have replaced the designer foot glass that you see with clear glass. We have also sometimes removed benches, sometimes swapped out the big, huge, beautiful shelters for tinier little ones. We kind of have a toolbox of things that we do that we're really working on. So next slide. Metrics. How are you guys gonna measure this? That's a great question. That's always a question, right? Is what you're doing working? So you can see this laundry list of goals and metrics to consider. I'm not gonna go through and read them all for the sake of time, but you can, look at them on your own. But some of these that are listed here, we already use them today to make some of the decisions that we're talking about in the draft plan. So I'm going to hand it off to Steve for the next one.
Thank you. So I'll be doing the training and supporting employees. My name is Steve McLaird. I've been with Metro Transit for 28 years. I started as a bus operator. It was my second career for me. But I started working weekends, so I did the 5 line at nights and weekends. And those are around, remember the 180 that we used to run from all over America? That was a challenge at the time. I was the one that was there catching all the people to go home. So I'd have an Arctic and a 40-foot Arctic coming in and a 40-foot bus that I had, trying to fit all those people into my bus. So it was a very interesting experience. I've also been a supervisor for Metro Transit, an assistant manager, a deputy director for bus operations, and now I'm the acting director for bus transportation for the group. So really what I want to, for this area, is very interesting, because I've been out with the frontline employees during the last 2 years, going out to the garages and talking with everybody. And with this process that we're going through right now, there's something that really sticks out for me, which is it's been very, very isolating for the frontline employees. And then particularly I'll speak for the bus operators, because I have those conversations. And it really came out when we were doing our small group pieces of it. One of the things that we did was really target some of our informal leaders for bus operators. We spent a couple of Saturdays with a mentor group for our apprenticeship program. And then we spent an additional time with our Transit Safety Security Committee. And those are the individuals that we wanted to get some specific feedback and see how it compared to the rest of the group, because those are the people that are a little more informed and involved than the normal frontline employee. But the thing that really came out was, in 2020, we really stopped training because you couldn't get together, everything shut down. So the contracts we had, the training sessions, we tried to do a flip over from in-person to online, and you miss it when you have this experience learning pieces of it, because now it becomes death by PowerPoint, that's all. And that's really the reaction we got. Also, the disconnection between employee groups. Transit Police is a good example. In the past, we used to have a liaison from Transit Police at each garage. We'd have coffee with the cops, whatever you want to call it, but they were out in the garages talking to the employees. That really all ended with COVID, because we were telling employees to stay away from each other, and they did. This is very, very timely right now, because it really gives us a chance to jumpstart the stuff we've been doing. And I can tell you, for me, it's exciting, because this really helps us get refocused on what we knew we were doing before and to get new things started. An example would be, one of the more effective programs that I get feedback on is something called Red Kite. So Red Kite is, we originally heard about it. I worked with the leadership at ATU, and SEPTA in Philadelphia years ago had this program called Red Kite. And it was really for helping build resiliency, conflict de-escalation, and really developing some empathy. It worked on the job, but it really worked personally at home and every place else too. So we did some research on that, and from the ATU side, they got the positive feedback, worth the effort, everybody loves it. I did the management piece, they loved it. So we were able to get a pilot program up here in 2016. And currently we have over 600 operators that we have gone through this program. And we have overwhelming positive feedback. So it tells me it's a good program. That was one of them we need to restart. So we just finished the contract process, got them under contract, and we just approved our training that's going to be starting in July again, which is a very good piece of it. One of the things that allows us to take a look at now really is, we kind of looked at bus drivers when we did this. But we have our other frontline workers, facility workers, the ones out doing the cleaning of the shelters and the transit platforms. They have the same kind of issues now that you're dealing with in the buses and the trains. So there's maybe an opportunity to expand some of these trainings. This is just one of them. We also have professional operator development, POD. We're looking at de-escalation techniques for that piece of it coming up. So we have training opportunities that we've done in the past. I can tell you we are also out with our partners. We're looking at, Hennepin County, what do the librarians do? Because they're dealing with some of the same issues we have. So we're looking at some of these partners. We reached out to our Sand Creek, our EAP. What do they have for resources? We reach out to the emergency managers for Metro Transit. So I tapped into the emergency management piece of it. What do they have for the critical incident response and training stuff? We are experimenting or exploring all avenues to try and find some good solutions for us. So the primary piece of it, I heard it over and over, training. We love the training, we want more training. The other thing that I heard was the connection with the police department. As Pam said, they do like the police department. They're struggling because they want that connection. COVID, civil unrest, really kind of worked on that relationship, and they lost the contact, and they want that back. So they do want them in the garages, they do want to talk to them. So we're working with the Transit Police Department. You'll see that the coffee with the cops and the scheduled meetings so that operators know when they're coming in. And it's not just operators, because now we can, again, we're going to need to expand when we talk about it's not just operators now, it's frontline employees, because everybody's having the same kind of issue, that they would like to have some conversations with the transit police. When we do all this training and supporting, the other thing that really came out was, if you're going to give us surveys and you're going to get feedback from us and you ask for it, you see the dots, if you're going to ask for us what's important, then you better come back and keep telling us how you're doing and what it is you're doing. So that, I think we heard that loud and clear, that if we do that, we maintain our credibility. If we don't, then we lose it. Next slide. Oh, sorry. Look at Lesley.
Good job.
And as Pam said too, then it becomes measurables. Because how do you know what it is you're doing that's working? We don't have all the measurables yet. We're trying to develop them. We do know the things that, how many people you send through training, things like this. We need to find a better way to, how effective was the training? So did the complaints go down? Did behavior, conduct issues decrease? Do we have fewer people leaving because they just can't take this job anymore? Those are some of the things we need to find a way to catch that data. The ultimate piece we look at here is when we do our surveys to find out what the satisfaction here, the customer satisfaction for us is the frontline workers. So if everything we do, we measure all these things, we've increased this, we've expanded that, did it make it a better place for them to work? Do they feel safer? Do they feel more secure when they do it? So that'll be the measurement piece that we look at as far as being effective about is what we're doing working. And again, the base piece here is, as Pam had said, we're really experimenting. And we're trying to explore things that we've not done before, and we're starting things that we've done in the past. So I think that this is a really good start for us to head on there, but we do have a lot of work to do as we move forward. That's it for me. I'll turn it over to Sergeant Mohamed.
Thank you, Steve.
You want to next slide?
Oh, yeah, on my head. Thank you, everyone. My name is Sergeant Kadra Mohamed. I'm the supervisor of the homeless action team with the police department. I've been there for 6 years now, so not as long as Steve and Pam or even Lesley, but have definitely witnessed a lot of transition within the police department since I first started. In my section, we'll be covering engaging customers and partners, and that's kind of been the theme along the way, whether we're engaging partners within the council and externally outside of the council. I will try my best not to use so much police jargon, so if there's something that you don't understand, please let me know. So the first draft action item was to develop an approach to regularly engage the public regarding public safety. And although this is kind of newer for the police department to engage with the public, it is something that is already in the plan to develop. And I think Pam and Drew might be better versed in speaking more on this, but regular outreach and engagement with the community and our different partners on what we do within the police department. And not only our successes, but the different things that we are facing, the challenges within the community and the era of policing that we're noticing today. And the different type of police work that Metro Transit deals with versus the municipality police departments, because it is, although we are bound by certain laws and jurisdictions, we generally face the same struggles in Metro Transit that we do within our cities. And that this area of work will be kind of related to what Pam stated earlier on providing safe and quality service opportunities for our riders, and also for the public to seek out information from the police department and create a transparent relationship. The next action item is to contract community-based organizations and support the prevention of violence within Metro Transit Police Department. This work we are currently doing and we do need to improve upon. Right now, our homeless action team does have a contract with a nonprofit organization, and they provide outreach services to our unsheltered population. And that is a wide range of services for mental health, substance abuse, and just unsheltered homelessness across the board. And we know, as Lesley stated earlier, that our transit system isn't the only system across the country that is facing these challenges. But I think engaging with our community partners is going to be very valuable in how we address these issues. A lot of them is not necessarily a police issue, because it's not a crime to be homeless, but it becomes a police issue when some of the actions that our unsheltered folks are taking part of affect our ridership. And of course, with some of the staffing levels that was mentioned earlier comes into play. We have to be creative with our resources. So engaging in these partners is going to be valuable to addressing a lot of the problems that we are seeing on transit. Next action item is to continue to invest in our homeless action team. Since 2018, we have expanded in has grown our resource opportunities within the HAT. It started off as a new pilot program within transit, and I might be a little biased being a supervisor of the unit, but I think it has been very effective. We have housed over 300 people since 2018. And as a police department, that is saying a lot, because we aren't a social service agency, but we understand that as human beings, these need to be addressed, and any one of us can be put in the situation that our unsheltered folks are in. So the police department, I think, and of course, I want to give credit to Chief Grates and our previous chiefs as well, that are very supportive in growing our HAT team, not only with the staffing level that we have now, but continuing and engaging partners and finding different resources and being creative on how we can deploy our resources out there in the best way possible. The next action item is to review and seek the options to expand the social service organizations, fostering those relationships. So this is kind of a continuous pattern here, that we want to engage in our community partners the unsheltered folk are dealing with a lot of barriers and trauma that we might not understand as a police department, but we understand that our community partners that we liaise with might be in a better position to help these individuals who are really in a tough spot. And our police department provides different trainings across the board for us to expand our tool belt that goes beyond the physical tool belt on our waist or on our backs, but different ways to engage with the community that we are serving, not just the unsheltered population, but regular ridership as well. And that goes for partnerships within the police or within the Met Council. So Pam and I do a really good job, I think, working together as far as community relations and how we can partner with other police departments outside of the council or outside of Metro Transit and ensure that our riders are getting the best service possible in a fair and equitable way to the unsheltered that are also on our trains. And another point was to reactivate some of the campaigns that the Met Council had pre-COVID, and the harassment campaign was mentioned as one highlighted, to continue working on. So although that some of these programs, as I mentioned before, and as Steve said as well, prior to COVID, was work that we were already doing and has already shown to be effective. But due to COVID, things had to slow down, and I think this is the best time to take advantage of re-engaging in these programs such as the harassment campaign. And this timing, I think it is at a perfect timing for us to reevaluate and continue the work that we have already been doing in the past. Another point was to evaluate the text for safeties and the staffing levels for that, whether there are opportunities to improve on how this is being promoted within Metro Transit. As an officer, we see a lot of phone calls from TCC, from civilians who report issues, and we continuously ask our riders to report something when they do see them. We can't solve an issue if we are unknown of what the issues are. But unfortunately, the perception of safety while they make these phone calls is an issue. So this text for safety is a way for the community to be able to report some of these issues in a safer manner, and they can text the issues that they're encountering on the public transit in general, and we can still respond as a police department and have that direct communication. So about reevaluating that resource that we were already using and expand on it and how we can make that better, and as another tool for our police officers to respond to calls and for our ridership to feel safe while still making those reports when we request that they do so. We want to relaunch Adopt a Stop, and again, this is another area that the police department works with Pam's team to ensure that we are taking back our transit system. And although we have kind of let it, I don't want to say let it go, but we have, taken a step back a little bit with COVID, and as long as we are engaging with each other and ensuring that, we cannot tolerate some of the behavioral issues that we're witnessing on the transit system. And we are addressing things in a fair and equitable manner, but ensuring that our ridership is also feeling safe while on board the trains or buses. So Adopt a Stop I think it's a great idea that needs to be relaunched. So each organization or each department within the council picks a stop and conducts engagement activities at that stop. Whether that's engaging with our riders or engaging with our partners at the certain stops and cleaning up and taking back and going back to a community-based engagement, I think is really the best model to go. And like I stated earlier, not all of the issues we're seeing is necessarily a police issue, but it's a societal issue that we need to work together on. Another point was to go back to transparency and reporting some of the public safety data and this action plan implementation back to the community, and as Steve said, back to our employees as well. A lot of this work we all are already currently doing, and the public isn't aware of the hard work that our employees and frontline workers are doing on a daily basis, and some of the pressures that they are put under. And I think being transparent and providing the data and what we are doing, what is working and what isn't working, will provide the community with some sense of relief and understanding, and can create a positive domino effect on how returning back to the ridership and increasing the numbers that we're seeing, which is already happening. Like Lesley said early on, we are seeing ridership going up, and moving that 2-car train will show that once the trains are fuller, promote more riders to join along. And for the last piece is also providing quarterly reports of public safety information on transit to you all as the council members. As I stated, the hard work that people on the ground are doing, and sometimes it isn't acknowledged because you guys are not aware. So I think providing the data and being transparent will help a lot. So some of the measurables, of course, it goes back to how do we know that the work we have been doing and that we need to re-engage in is actually working? And that is by the increased frequency and opportunities that people provide are providing their input to public safety, and how they feel what we've been doing, has that been working? As ridership returns, those surveys and how people feel, and whether what we're doing is working, and if it's not, is there something else that we need to be doing? Increase availability of information. So I know Drew does a great job of that on our social media and on our web pages, but looking for different opportunities to expand that opportunity for our public to know what are we up to and what are we doing to address some of the issues that we're seeing. And of course, the decreased number of people experience homelessness on transit as a means for shelter rather than unsheltered. And that I think that one is going to be difficult to show. But as I stated before, our homeless action team works tirelessly to ensure that we are assisting folks, and housing 300 people for a police department is, I think, quite incredible. And providing that data, again, to you all and to the public and let them know is a good way, is a measurable goal, I think, for that part. And then tracking the information and the different activities that our contractors are out there engaging with folks, whether that's the contract we currently have or the future ones we are seeking. And the last part, achieving the target in the target response to timely public safety in a timely manner. And of course, that comes with the amount of calls per service that we're getting. And if people, and the text to safety technology we're taking advantage of in ARTIC are all ways that we can measure those goals and whether what we're doing is working or not. And I believe the next slide is for you.
Yeah, thank you. Just as we start to conclude this, we wanted to note that, part of the police work group's recommendation included that second piece of the vision about addressing systemic issues by fostering community relationships and partnerships. And I think a lot of what you heard in the examples that Pam, Steve, and Sergeant Mohamed shared were really our approach of trying to really focus on what we feel we can control and influence at Metro Transit. So as we went through the process of trying to identify potential action steps, we were really applying this feasibility lens. Do we have the people, do we have the resources to pull this off? And if we didn't think we did, we kind of set that aside, and we've kept those ideas, but they aren't in the action plan if we don't think we have a viable path to do them. I think the piece of the plan that we really wanted to surface with this group and kind of open a conversation about is how we get more at the root causes. I think there's, as we've been thinking about this, and this schema may not be complete, but some of the levers or levels of action are, that first bullet, staff level operational partnerships. You heard Sergeant Mohamed talk about the work that HAD and the police department and other aspects of our agency do with other governments, with nonprofits, with the business community. So, on a micro level, we definitely are building those partnerships to try to connect people to the services they need or try to address a troubled stop. That's not in itself going to get at the root causes of some of the deep-seated issues in our community. And transit being part of the community, it's showing up on transit. I think there's kind of this second level of work around Metropolitan Council policies. Pam indicated that one of our action items is really taking a good look at our code of conduct, and not just the content of it, not just the signage of it, but the enforcement practices around it, and really being able to come back to you, hopefully in the coming months, to say this is what we believe the standards should be. Some of the code of conduct is in state statutes, so it's not all flexible, but certainly there are opportunities for us to assess what those standards should be, but also make sure that we have the council support for really trying to communicate and establish that these are the standards for public space on our transit system, as one way to try to use policy to support practice. But then this final bullet, this idea of what is the Metropolitan Council's role, including you as council members' role, in helping to get deeper to the root causes of mental illness, chemical addiction, unsheltered homelessness. Again, these issues that are not unique to transit, but because we are so embedded in community, continue to become visible on transit. And that is not part of this plan as it stands now. I think that's really one of the open pieces that, even if we execute everything in here seamlessly, alone, it's not going to have maybe the impact it could if we're looking broader at some of how to convene and advocate for larger scale change. So again, we're gonna open this to discussion, and I realize we talked a lot at you, which was not the intent, so I apologize for that, but hopefully you haven't forgot your questions. We do still have steps to do on this document. Again, we were deliberately wanting to bring it to you when it was taking shape and had some concrete actions to it, but we know we still need to refine it based on feedback today and other feedback we're getting. I think that's especially true in this area of measurable goals and really getting a good handle on what metrics we want to be tracking and what data we have available now versus what we're going to need to take some time to develop. And so we have some of that housekeeping to do with this document too, to really make sure we're situating ourselves to begin implementation this summer. We do anticipate bringing forward a business item that would seek the Met Council endorsement of the general direction, probably at that area of work level. It's a living document, it's a dynamic plan. As we get into implementing it, we're going to have to make changes, we're going to learn from our work and need to adjust. So we aren't going to seek approval of every word in the document, but we certainly want to get to a place that this body feels comfortable saying that this is the general thrust that this public safety on transit work should take. And part of that business item would be establishing this quarterly report requirement to really make sure you are able to hold us accountable for progress on this work. And with that, we put together a couple discussion questions just to kind of seed this, but I imagine after hearing all of our presentation, you probably have many questions too. But again, as policymakers, really interested in what you need to know about this work, what interests you want to make sure it's serving, and what support you need from us to talk about it in your communities and with your constituencies.
And Lesley, thank you, and thank Pam, Steve, Commander. I think now is a time for feedback, conversation, questions. I will say at the outset, we could probably be here for another 3 hours because I have my own list of things. And down to, like in this particular transit station, are we doing this with that? But, so I would suggest we kind of keep it as a broader theme, got a general sense and direction of reactions, which is what I think you're looking for. I like the idea that we're going to be asked to approve directionally a starting point, which is what I think you're asking, and that's the action, because this is going to be a living document that will continue to evolve as we learn, and we will continue to hear about how that's going, and maybe it becomes the framework upon which we would be adjusting along the way, if that's correct.
Sure, yes.
Okay. Okay, with that, I will hold my questions, because we're gonna hear first from Councilmember Bento, who had her hand up first.
I'm waiting. I'm curious, I'm a resident of Maplewood, and in Maplewood, I believe we now have 2 embedded social workers on the Maplewood Police Department. And I'm wondering if the idea of piloting or exploring social work engagement as part of our police department's been considered, and if there are any other transit systems in the country that have done that.
Chair, and I don't, Sergeant Mohamed, do you want to start, or I can
You can
start?
start.
Okay. I'd say, Councilmember Bento, been discussed, and I think it's something that we want to continue to look into. As Sergeant Mohamed mentioned, as part of the Homeless Action Team, we do have an active contract with an organization that provides outreach services and some connection to mental health services and so forth. And Sergeant Mohamed, I don't know, is Radius, are they licensed social workers, or are they more put in connection with?
Different workers within their organization are licensed in different things, so either mental health, chemical dependency, or housing specific.
So that's one service we have, and one of the action items is to really evaluate that and look for an opportunity to potentially broaden that. I would say the other piece is, in recent months, been meeting monthly with Hennepin County and their leadership around issues of homelessness, healthcare for homeless. And as part of that, I know they've had case managers work directly with the Homeless Action Team, and I don't know if you want to say a few words about how that partnership is working, but that's another avenue
Yeah.
we're working to.
Sorry, you had another.
Well, I was just gonna ask, is there a need for a social worker or social worker-like individual in addition to the HAT team? I mean, in other parts of the transit system, whether it be on light rail or BRT or bus lines? I mean, are there times when, rather than sending a police officer, a social worker might be the person to send?
So currently, we do have a RFP process for a bid for that situation exactly. Right now, the social worker that rides with HAT, dispatch kind of knows what type of calls isn't necessarily a criminal activity, but might be related to homelessness. And they send our officer along with our social worker, and Maplewood is one of the sites that we currently go to. She is on the trains with us. Unfortunately, that's for the Ramsey County side. So for Hennepin County, we are looking for ways to contract with social workers so that they can be on board trains with us and buses in our high call volume areas. So that is in the works. It's just putting in that RFP and bidding process is the only thing.
Thank you.
I'll kind of move around, get on this side of the table. Robert.
I didn't have my hand up yet, so.
Oh, you didn't? Good, well, I'm never getting back to you.
I just saw everyone
Yeah.
over there with their hands up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take one for this side of the table. First of all, I just want to say thank you, everybody. I think not just everyone here, but everyone, the broader team. I think this is really comprehensive and it's been a really good approach. Definitely shout out to Lesley. I think pulling all this together is very challenging to make it digestible, and I think you guys did a really nice job. Just want to make a quick comment, and then it'll feed to my question. But in general, what I'm hearing from you is there's really a common theme of the sort of need to rebuild connections. And I think I heard that of between Metro Transit and the police department, between us and that between all of us in the communities. And I think that really, coming out post-COVID, when we talk about how we're building back ridership and developing this system that people are comfortable on, it's really something that I feel is very embedded in the work that you're doing. And so one of the questions that I have, and this really came up when the talk about limiting late night service, or potentially reviewing limiting late night service. As we come out of COVID, we're looking at how we rebuild ridership and where we do. And one of the things you're hearing things like we want more like late night ridership for whether it's events or people with shift work and that type of thing. And we're gonna see some of that. This is a very specific comment. I think I wanna broaden that, that really how we respond to COVID to build back service and tie these things together. But that sort of theme of what people need and getting them where they want. So how do we look at that, but yet look at the action here, but still be responsive to what our riders actually need? Simple question.
Yes. Chair Zelli, Councilmember Barber. I'll start and I would invite Pam to jump in too if you want. I'm glad you flagged this one because one piece we didn't mention when we were walking through it is some of the feedback we did get from external stakeholders when we went back to validate this plan was we're gonna revise that one to not assume the answer and basically take it a step back and say, really review and assess the relationship between hours of service, both actual transit service, but also facilities hours, and the relationship between that and security, and really start by reviewing it and understanding the trade-offs, because I think we're at the point we don't know what the answer is. But we're hearing, and this is one of the items that was fairly popular from employee engagement too. So that's part of where this is coming from is, can we take a look at what that relationship is, and especially in an environment where we have constrained resources, both constrained operator resources, but also constrained police and security personnel resources, just kind of ask the question. So I think at this stage, it really is kind of committing to look at it. And it may be, it's not worth the trade-off. It's not worth what it does in terms of turning off riders to move forward with it. I think we just don't know. I don't know if I'm really addressing your question, kind of.
I think you are, and it was a hard question to ask because I didn't quite know how to target it either, but I appreciate the looking at the trade-offs. I mean, that really is, and I think it can't be a one-time thing. As we're coming out of the pandemic, it has to be kind of a continual thing to look at, because those trade-offs may change over time, but it means you have looked at it holistically and there's reasons for choices at certain points in time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll second Deb said, and very impressive. 1,000 people connected or more, and impressive strategies from the red kite. I've looked up online today about what that was all about. It's very impressive, and going from 3 cars to 2, and the whole kit and caboodle. I'm curious, Lesley, you mentioned that the team was considering some strategies that you didn't pursue or didn't put into this plan.
Yes.
Because they weren't achievable or for a variety of reasons. And I'm just kind of curious, what are some of those things that were kind of tossed around? Were there barriers, financial barriers, or understanding the hiring concerns that we're already having with folks who were trying to hire and having a tough time? What were some of those ideas?
Chair, Councilmember Lindstrom. Excellent question. Of course, my mind is completely blanking. I have this file on my computer called the parking lot. I would say, I don't want to say financial reasons were not a consideration, but that wasn't the primary reason that things would end up on there. Sometimes it was just more, we didn't have enough time to talk about it more as a group. So one really easy example, something that's on there, may even get pulled into this in the coming weeks, relates to how we make sure we're triaging reports about issues at facilities in a way that really equips our facilities workers to make sure we're addressing things in priority order. Not that that doesn't happen now, but just kind of looking at that system. But it was one of those things that needed some more conversation before we wanted to put it in this document. Honestly, I wish I had that document with me, and I don't, but I don't know if others remember anything off the top of your head of kind of what you looked at, but some ideas got eliminated entirely, which is
of course the ones I'm always thinking
no.
of.
That's how I was.
They were
So yeah,
bad.
I'm sorry, I am not
That's great.
remembering all that's on there, but
I appreciate it, thank you.
Wendy?
Thank you. Thanks for all of this. I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of those bigger issues that you need us to work on. We kind of, council members went in a room and did their thing. Now you guys went in a room and did your thing. And I don't want to lose the things that we have to do together, that you can let us know our problems so that we can work on the bigger systemic stuff. One of the things that came to mind for me was I had heard from the Dakota County Sheriff, the challenges that they're having with people that are mentally ill and dangerous. And they might have killed somebody, but they can't be held responsible for it because they're that mentally ill. But they're sitting in jail because the state hospital doesn't have room for them. But we also have people on the buses that we can't hold them responsible for what they're doing. But yet we can't get them to go in the places like the guy that wrecked the train and did over $100,000 of damage. We need to do whatever we can to get the word out on those sorts of challenges, because we can't have nice things if we can't take care of them. You know, when I heard about you guys getting rid of some of the shelters and making smaller ones, it's like, maybe we need to have a communication thing, letting the neighborhood know you guys lost your nice station because of people who are being jerks. It brings me back to when Minneapolis did their top 100 troublemakers and concentrated on them. I'm sure you guys know who your top repeat customers are that are problems, and whatever we can do to help you guys deal with those kind of people, I really want to be able to do. And the other thing was, there was discussion about interaction with council members, and I know you guys are short-staffed, but we still would like, or at least I would like to be able to do ride-alongs and talk to people one-on-one. I had one scheduled for back in December and it was abruptly canceled, and I don't want to feel separate from our police officers. I want to let them know that we care and get eyes on of what's actually going on for them so that we can make better decisions.
Judy?
Thank you. I appreciate everything that's been said, and I'm gonna kind of jump off where Councilmember Wolf left off because I appreciate a lot of her comments. And I know there's a piece of this too that really is about the crime that's being committed in our communities and on our streets and in our platforms and in our vehicles. And you know, nowhere in any of this do we talk about gang activity. Nowhere in this do we talk about the under economy of drug dealing. Nowhere do we talk about this where it shows up on, our facilities or on our assets. But we do have these other police departments that are working on this every day. And not only do we have 2 chiefs of police in addition to ours, but we also have, I think, Hennepin County Attorney coming in, and I think Ramsey County Attorney as well. That's a big deal too. So I am just a believer that is, I would say, a significant piece of this, and I see it's referenced as far as reducing criminal activity, but I mean, there are, repeat offenders there where there are well-known folks out there doing things that are just being spit through the system over and over. And I know a lot of leaders in local government are fed up with that, especially with the carjacking and some of these other heinous things that are taking place that we didn't even see 5 years ago. So I would like to see a little bit more about how do we communicate with those other departments so that we're sharing information. And I know information sharing has gotten much better over the past decade or two, but that's really important to make sure that our officers and our people on the trains have the best information that they can have, so that crime doesn't care about which jurisdiction they're in, only we care about jurisdictions, right? So what you're talking about, though, is reaching out and finding those other partners, which we've done so well. But I guess I don't want to lose sight of that hard crime that's taking place. And of course, having to have the right lenses that we apply to all of this. But, those are the big newsmakers, whatever they're doing, and that's where the perception versus reality piece comes in. And so if there are things that this council can do, I think, we'd all be there to do that piece of it as well. And I think that when we do have new sheriff, or I'm sorry, I'll have new sheriff too. Yeah, everybody's up.
New chief.
So first of all, find out who's on your ballot and vote wisely. And when they get in, I think it would almost behoove this council, this body, to bring some of them in and have a good discussion with them and level set from the beginning what we're going through right now, because they might know what they're walking into, but they might not understand, how our piece relates to all of it. So I would like to just.
You mean sheriffs and
Police chiefs,
attorney
sheriffs,
generals,
the county attorneys, really, because.
U.S. attorney.
Well, yeah, we got them,
Judges.
But I mean, you know, we all know that this is a system where people are moving through this system everywhere and we only own one piece of it. So those other folks that have jurisdiction and authority, let's hope we're all aligned and they know what we want out of this. I guess I would have that be a very clear piece of the things that we're doing, in addition to all the other wonderful things that are.
Wes, occasionally you raised your hand because I thought you, and you've been really instrumental, and Lesley, we're doing an amazing job. It'd be kind of helpful to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to something that was said both by Councilmember Wolf and what you just said, Councilmember Johnson, that there is, I think, a role for us, but there's also a role for the council to engage in these discussions. And what we've tried to do in this document, as Lesley pointed out, is to focus on what we could have in our scope of control and influence. That's not the scope of the problem, that's the scope of control of our influence. And I think about the charge of this body being the efficient economical development of the region and how important these issues are. These issues play out across the board. One of the things that we heard from our staff was there needs to be consequences for behavior. And I would expand that to say there needs to be responses and consequences to behavior, because sometimes it's not all about consequences. Sometimes it's about treatment. Sometimes it's about support programs. Sometimes it's about other things. But sometimes it is response to crime. And many times what I hear from our officers is we bring someone in, and by the time we get our paperwork done, they're already out and they're writing our system again. And they're frustrated by that. This doesn't need to be, this can be compassionate. It should be compassionate in the right ways. Sometimes it needs to be just definitive, and that's a frustration we hear from our officers, from our employees, and from our customers, by the way. There doesn't seem to be a response for behavior. And these are larger discussions that need to occur. They're also small discussions. They're both and. It's not an either or alternative here. And I just want to say, when it comes to issues like mental health and chemical dependency issues, they play themselves out in so many ways. We are a rich state. We are a rich region. We should be able to address some of those needs in this region that we're not addressing. And a lot of times we throw housing as the answer. Oftentimes we need housing and service. We don't just need housing. We need housing and treatment. It's a healthcare issue. It's a social service issue. There was an article, an extended article in the newspaper the other day about juvenile justice. The point of, I don't know if people here agree with all the points of the article, but one point that I took away is, once again, we took one response away and didn't replace it with another response. We just took the response away. And these are situations where we have kids in our system that need support, and we take the consequence away, which may have been totally appropriate not to criminalize this and create long-term criminals in these situations, but there needed to be another response. And so all that to say that I think this is a body that is, one of its tasks is to be a convener. And we can participate in that. But I think it's directly related to its mission of an efficient and economical development of the region. I really do. Because I think we talk about people wanting to build businesses here. We talk people wanting to use transit as a supporter of the economics of this area. I think these issues we see on transit, because we see community issues on transit, are issues of our region. And that's what we wanted to. One of the things we wanted to emphasize.
Thank you for saying that. And I'll actually follow up with a question, maybe for you or Lesley, and that is, and you haven't talked about it. It shouldn't be impolitic to say that a transit system is not a shelter. It's not an appropriate shelter. Right. These are vulnerable people, and it's not illegal to be poor and unsheltered. But this is not the right place to be if you're not going somewhere. So the question is, I read articles in New York, the governor and the mayor and the MTA are working together saying, we have got to not have a separate system to shelter. And they're getting very, not draconian, but hard. Now, I'm having lunch with the housing commissioner tomorrow, that's on my subject line. Because I think we've had issues before where within agencies, they say, hey, a train is warm, give me a break. And I'm like, it is, but these are more than just, this is more than real estate, there's other issues. And I think we need, as a council, to come together and maybe, we're not putting this on staff, we put it on ourselves as, what is our policy? How do we find the resources and what are they? And I think that, and I'm not sure it's true, so the question is, you've heard that we partner with shelters, with former shelters, but I've also heard that they're given, the $1 fees when they're full. And I'm not sure, is that true? And can we accept that? I mean, it's kind of tough, but where do we draw the line? Because I think we do need to draw some line.
I want to just respond to the premise, and that is that shelter on transit is not treatment. Shelter on transit is not dignified either for the person that's there. There's no dignity in that. And when I hear this, in one of my past roles, I was Assistant Commissioner of Mental Health for the Department of Human Services. And when I hear people say that that's appropriate, it just kills me to think that we're settling on that as a viable solution. That doesn't mean that you don't respond with alternatives. Again, going back to the juvenile justice story, that you can't just say not this and not something else, but you have to say not this. Otherwise, there won't be something else. And I think Cadre probably knows more about your specific question than anyone here. I'm setting you up, Cadre. Sergeant Mohamed, I'm sorry.
No, Cadre is just fine. Chair, I think you brought a great point. It is not an appropriate place for habitation, and as the general manager said, we are settling as a society. And I think creating, like I stated, the creating of those partnerships with these shelters is going to be important. As we know, the governor didn't provide funding for some of these shelters in Ramsey County. So I think it will be difficult, but staying consistent in these partnerships is going to be helpful for our police department and our ridership in general on both sides of the river, whether Hennepin or Ramsey County. And whether it is a shelter or some kind of mental health facility, I think would, in partnership with our social workers. And because of staffing levels, we cannot bear that brunt all on us. It is good to share the resources and amongst each other, and whether that be on a community-based level or on a legal level, and even judicially, ensuring, like you stated, the mental health issues that we are seeing, that they're being addressed, or the minor criminal activity that stems from homelessness and substance abuse, that those are being addressed on a higher level, I think would assist our ridership in general. Yeah. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, that was really helpful. Riva, you had your hand.
Oh, yeah, just really appreciate this dialogue, and yes, we could be here for 3 hours, but it's very important to hear from all of you here and to hear from council members. These issues are very complex, as we can see, and I can tell from the presentation that the action plan is immediate. It has a lot of layers to it, and if we can do 90% of everything that's in this action plan, I think that would be something for us to be very proud of. Saying that we want accountability, quarterly reporting, and continuous action, which I heard Lesley say. This reporting to the council, to our community as a regional body, can be very helpful in understanding the issues and how complex they are, and that every reaction, has another reaction. If we get really tough and we're doing juvenile justice and we don't realize that, when we put a person in jail and their family doesn't have a father, and that happens for 3 or 4 or more generations, that has a consequence. So, we are responsible for, for acknowledging that and making sure that we don't have unintended, consequences, because we lack information or we lack compassion or some levers to keep things balanced. So, it's a lot of work. This is not going to be easy. But we also have to remember that we're in a perfect storm with the pandemic. Things that were already kind of going downhill got worse, not just in the Twin Cities, 7 county region, but across the nation. If we do all the things that we've been working so hard and diligently over the last couple of years, we will be in a much better place than if we hadn't.
Great point. Robert, you did have something.
Oh, yeah, thank you, thanks, and just add my thanks to the team that presented and to everyone else that contributed to this. And it's interesting to watch this process. It's just a little more immediate almost, because as several of you said, we're kind of in new territory, we're trying to figure out something new. So we as policymakers did, we went off into our little room, and then you guys went, but it's cool to see the connection between the two and then how this kind of will blossom into action and results. I'm just gonna move through your questions really quickly. I'm just starting number 2, the thoughts and the direction the draft plan is heading, I think looks great. I think it looks like what we intended from the work group and then the council that sort of endorsed the recommendations from the work group. A couple of thoughts. One is that the idea that came up, and Monday I was thinking the same thing, the sort of downtown 100, we called them in Minneapolis, and then most of the precincts out of the central business district picked up some kind of model like that. It's crime prevention, but focusing efforts where they needed. I was thinking of it when you were talking about bus stops, and the ones that are always bad, and I think the concerns the geographic concerns that you raised, I think like 80% of them are in my district or something. I was trying to map it really quickly.
Focusing on you.
Yeah. We'll all be better. But I just really support that, the idea of focusing efforts where there is the most need. Kind of moving quickly through as policymakers, what would be important in quarterly reports. For me, a couple things. One is stakeholder input, officers frontline, people, and especially riders and customers as well, or equally, but to hear what's really going on out in the environment would be helpful. And the other piece, and I'm in a couple of different conversations like this, but we're talking about prevention, right? I've been in conversation with the Minneapolis Office of Violence Prevention, and you're trying to measure something that doesn't happen because you're successful. And so that's, we're talking about preventing violence, and you guys are smarter than me about this, and so, but how we kind of measure, we can see crime go down, but how do we really measure if we're successful at preventing something? How do we measure that? And so maybe some thought given there. And for what information to support to talk about it, I would say Metro Transit Police personnel and transit personnel out in the community communicating. And I see these guys all the time, I'll tell you. I mean, I see Carol Lafleur almost every day, literally, in my day job, because we're a community engagement organization as well. I see Sergeant Mohamed frequently. I saw Interim Chief Grates out in the community. Those kind of interactions, and so, I've been in, and many of us have sort of service planning, let's say, or informational meetings with community, and you have Metro Transit Police identifiable by their shirts or whatever out in the community now, but just more of that kind of mixing, and I'm just gonna lift up my support of working with community organizations, and whether that's what you were talking about, Councilmember Bento, with social workers or those other kinds of response, but those, community-based work, support work will be much more effective than anything we would have it, sort of departmentalized, I believe, and so how do we continue to leverage that, those community relationships and community resources that are already there. And finally, what are we missing? And this is just one quick piece, and it's about I hear this a lot from just in the community. So my office is on Franklin Avenue. I'm right between the LRT station, Franklin LRT, and what will be the D line station at Chicago and Franklin. A really rough spot. I'll just say I bike through it almost every day. I mean, it doesn't feel safe even in the middle of the day. Just the conditions there. And so what I hear from people in the community a lot is the approach to transit, and this kind of goes into the jurisdiction thing we were talking about and stuff. So, people who live within whatever 6 blocks of a transit station, those are critical too, and how safe they are. I mean, we have organized patrols near my office, so school kids can go back and forth to the transit stops, because it just isn't safe. So that is part of that transit experience, as well. And I think I don't see it in this plan. Thanks. Thank you.
If the last 6 blocks, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Connections around the station. Sue, you were.
Yeah, this isn't related to any of the questions, but when we had our retreat here several weeks ago, we all went flying out of here because of that horrible storm. And we've had a number of horrible storms since then, and Monday night in the middle of that horrible storm, I was reading the materials for this. And my power went out, but I still had juice in my laptop, so I was good. But what happens on transit in the middle of a storm like that? What, safety-wise? What happens to our employees? What happens to our riders? What happens to our light rail and our buses? What do we do?
They don't know.
Well, Steve and I have been here for every storm for more than 20 years. Chair and council member. So I'll just say that, we have procedures in place where our control centers are notifying employees who are out in the field about, what impending weather might be on the way, using connections with National Weather Service and pushing messages out for information. However, because of the geographic area that we do cover and how expansive the service area is, we rely on training staff who are in the field to utilize decision making for their own safety and the safety of the customers about what they need to do to seek shelter or stop the bus. We have procedures in place for extreme conditions. For example, a couple of weeks ago, there was a big storm on a Wednesday night. In that case, I was texting with the general manager and Drew and others, just letting them know, hey, we have really high winds right now. It's not a good time for trains to be on flyovers, and gate arms get blown into OCS, the overhead wires and whatnot. So we need to pause service until this passes through. That's really difficult to do because that's not our business, and we know that there are people at stations, maybe in the elements, without a train to seek shelter. But we need to make a call that we feel is most appropriate given each of those circumstances. And winter weather adds a whole nother dynamic because of the direct life safety issues with freezing and frostbite. But we do try to take that very seriously and are always looking for feedback and ways to improve. And our operators are frankly the best ones to tell us if we got it right or not. And Steve and his team in bus and Mark and the team at light rail, and then coordinating with the police department on what was our response like, and how could we have done better to both communicate internally and then externally as well.
Has there ever been a circumstance, excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Sorry. Has there ever been a circumstance where you've had to evacuate a train or a bus and get people into some other shelter?
There has.
I'm talking about this kind of weather that we're experiencing now.
Yes. Yes. Chair, council members, in the extreme weather, we have operators that what they'll do is they'll find a location that's safe. Would be a solid building. So we've had buses that have evacuated. Either they'll call us right away or they'll grab their cell phone and call us once they get inside. But they will take all the passengers and they'll go find a location that gets away from windows. So we've had that. And then it's a challenge of telling them, okay, it's okay to come back out again and contacting them. But usually we know, we have GPS on all the buses and we have communication with all the operators. It has to be pretty severe. I mean, we're used to driving in some adverse environments, but in that particular case, it was the the tornado we had in the North Minneapolis area, because we were directly impacted there. So that was situations where people they took shelter in a solid building, because that's what they're instructed to do.
We're gonna go down a rabbit hole. I could do a century in the bus business.
Oh.
We evacuate buses all the time for
Right.
different reasons. Not all the time, but more times than usual. Every day. Not that often.
Not riding those buses.
But we lost a bus with the GPS went out in the middle of a tornado. It took us 3 weeks to find it. 10 blocks away. This is a 45-foot bus. It was crinkled up looking like a Coke can. Buses are not safe in a tornado, a high wind. I'll get some pictures to show. Chai, you've been very patient.
Thank you. I have one quick comment and question. My comment is that I know we noticed that the two major cities are also looking for a police chief too. And I hope we don't we don't rush or delay our own process. As part of their process, Minneapolis and St. Paul are to find a police chief that works well for them, but we should find a police chief that works well for us. And our process should be organic and integral to our own institution. And my question is for Pam's presentation. If the Arctic Center is newer and not all the cameras feed into there, where do the rest of the cameras feed into? Do they just live on a server somewhere until a crime is reported and then we go back and access that?
Chair, Councilmember Lee, I'm going to refer to the expert.
Yeah, we're looking
Where are you?
Hello, Chair, council members. Essentially, I would say, with the exception of the buses, 95% of all the cameras in the system have the ability to feed into our system through our asset protection unit, migrating servers all up onto, kind of going up into the cloud and being able to access them. So the only ones we don't have right now are the buses, and the way that data is captured by us is anytime a bus goes to a garage or some transit centers, it connects to Wi-Fi and does a wireless download, which then we have access to for that video.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Phil, and then Chad.
Thank you. So let me continue that question here, and then I'll go what I started to say. But also I wonder about the response time. So if you have the camera, so my friend was Commodore that got killed on the bus, but how soon, like if you see a disturbance on a bus or whatever, can you respond to it, send police or whatever to a safety for cameras?
Chairs of the council. So if we have the real-time ability, if we're notified, may I be the first to say we've got a lot of vehicles out there, we can't watch everything at once. If we're notified, immediately me and my staff will pull up the cameras and see what's going on. A lot of times we have the ability to rewind the cameras as well, so not just look at them live and get accurate descriptions of victims, suspects, potential witnesses and whatnot, and be able to give that to the officers so they know exactly what they're coming into. And so while they're driving to the call, they can get a lot of that information if it's available to them, so that when they arrive on scene, they have a lot more of a picture other than just maybe a disturbance of some sort. We can say, well, on one hand, the people are just arguing, it doesn't look all that severe, so when we get there, or on the other hand, hey, this person has a weapon and they put it in this pocket, so the officers know how to safely approach a person to eliminate, or to try and eliminate any use of force or anything like that, and keep everybody safe, not only the officers, but members of the public.
Good, thank you. And then just if I can get my comments before Chai brought the good comment up. But again, great thanks, and a lot of my comments were what Wes addressed a little bit too, where during transit, but there's a relationship with housing and mental health and dependency and things like that. But a couple of my things was you mentioned the 6 stops, and so I know the stops not as well as Robert over there, but I've also wondered, like, what about the Broadway stops at Lindale or Rice and University or downtown Minneapolis? I thought those are like the elephants in the room that were not put on the 6, and I thought they could be a top 10, but maybe those not at the same level then, or?
Chair, Councilmember Sterner, I'm so grateful that you brought up Broadway and Lindale. I can tell you that very shortly, you may get communication from me, and I haven't looked clearly to see who that council member is for that Oh, my favorite.
Yeah, do that favorite?
No, they're all my favorites.
I thought so.
Yeah, but remember, I talked about our Champion Facilities Committee. A couple of weeks ago, the group of us, including Brian Funk, went out to Broadway and Lyndale to assess. There was one big thing that we heard from the 2 Saturdays we spent with the operator mentors, that they do not feel safe at that intersection. And it came up over and over and over again. It's come up at the Transit Safety and Security meeting a lot. And so what our proposal is going to be for the time being is the southbound on Lyndale shelter. That's just adjacent to the Merwin Liquor parking lot. We are gonna temporarily remove that shelter. Transit customers are not in that shelter using it. They're not. And they don't feel safe standing there. In fact, we've heard from them that they actually go a half a block down or 6 blocks away just to catch that bus to make their connection. So temporarily, we'll talk. That's the plan for the southbound shelter on Lyndale. The westbound shelter on Broadway at Lyndale, we are going to temporarily relocate it to Broadway and Aldrich, which is further on down by the Cub Foods. We see most people using that location instead of the location, adjacent to Merwin Liquor. The other 2 bus stops at that location, they're used a lot, specifically by people with mobility. We are for now going to keep them, but we've already, when this committee looks at those types of facilities or intersections, bus stops, we pull data from the customer relations database, we pull data from the police, and really get a holistic look of what's happening now. When we change a shelter, remove a shelter, take out a bench, we have proven track records at some of these locations that it actually works. We've gotten feedback from customers, thank you for doing what you did, because now I can wait in the shelter. So that's our plan for Broadway and Lyndale. I know that there's other probably higher profile bus locations, but the 6 that we've identified are the highest. Happy to entertain any others on your list.
Can I, one quick follow-up and then I'll be done. I'm sorry, I'm kind of doing it backwards here, but none of it comes out of my mouth sometimes here. But just as the great program on that one, but I have the luxury of hearing them through the Equity Advisory Committee, and I was on the Transit Accessibility today, so I'm kind of like trying to be a voice for the committees too. But I think one of the things with signage is good. We talked about redoing the signage, so I think signs for texting if there's an issue should be really rampant. It should be accessibility, whether we are blind or what have you, that we can see that and that it's really visible whatever vehicle we're riding on in that. And when we look at redoing the signs, I think that's huge. And I really like the 2 cars, 3. That's amazing, because I've had people where 2 in the car, got accosted in that, and if we get more people, it gives us a perception and actuality of more riders per unit. I think that's going to give us safety in numbers with it as well. And my other thing is the more visibility we can do, whether it's police officers or ambassadors, what have you, that's going to be really good, because I know there's the perception, but right now I think we're dealing with the potential and the actual safety issues, and the more visibility that, like, policing visibility is a huge thing about deterrent, and if we could do more of that, I think that's really great in that. And in the interest of time, that's all I got, so thank you.
Thanks, John, and then Bob. Chuck.
When I'm looking at it, I think we focus a lot on our ridership and our customers that are actually riding the bus or train or any other things, but I don't see much around the neighborhoods in which our stops are located. And we listened to a testimony the other day, or comments at a community meeting over north, and but the person that was was speaking was from south and over by the 38th and Hiawatha. But you could feel the pain that she felt and how unsafe she felt while she was making her comments here. And what we do here is better to respond, or what we have the capabilities is infrastructure. And maybe not mental health, but infrastructure. And so if we looked at the possibility of creating a zone around each spot, whether it is a good or bad zone is irrelevant, but that has the appropriate lighting or ability to draw security, or even having some of that training that can happen that you're going to give anyway to everybody else. If that can happen to the neighbors, so it's what to expect. And we're very quick to tout the benefits of a light rail stop or a transit stop, but there are some difficulties with the people who have to live right next to it. And so I didn't see a lot in there. I think that's one thing we do well, is infrastructure and planning. And I think, I mean, again, mental health may be a reach for us. It's not to ignore it, but that's something that we can do. And if there was a zone that had this much lighting, this much things around each stop that we have, I think that would go a long way to improve the safety, if not the reality, the feeling, which is a reality at that point. And we had that come up with in our planning meeting the other day, and we talked about all the different things, but safety was in our group, was the top issue. So anyway, I think that that's something we could spend more time, that we have a better, where we have more ownership and more resources possibly, but the talent to actually respond to it.
And just to follow up on that idea, which I think is great, that's the kind of thing as policymakers where we can kind of look toward other jurisdictions, cities, neighborhood groups, and kind of create a vision for lighting or training. So I think that's something.
And to respond about what happened in the storm, although it was a terrible storm we're heading, but Chair Zelli and I found my basement in some sangria, so that's how we responded. He didn't call to see where everyone else was, no.
I was good. I would say, unfortunately, that homemade sangria, that's a good thing.
Mr. Chair, just to add on quickly to that point, and that in and of itself would be a really good model for the new lines that we're putting in, because not everybody's a fan of the blue line.
Right.
And that is the reason they're not a fan, because of the zones that they know are gonna become
It's a
concerned.
system, not just a line.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Molly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this. It's just outstanding. A couple thoughts on your question, what information or support do you need to talk about this work? I don't think that I have a meeting with a city or a community group or at a family picnic that safety doesn't come up. And so this was a great overview, but if you can somehow communicate that to us in a brief one-page talking point thing. You have the 16 and hopefully soon to be 17 megaphones here who interact with communities all the time. And then with the quarterly updates, if you can give us, okay, here's what we've tried, here's what we're doing. And I realize this isn't gonna all happen at once, but we can continue to grow this and also make people aware that we are continuing to expand what we're doing and trying new things, and everything doesn't have to be a home run, and we're gonna have some failures, but we're trying, and we're open to other suggestions and other ideas in specific communities, because that's where, you've engaged with so many people, but there are others who are gonna say, well, have you tried this or that? That could be of value. So I would say use us in as soon as you can, and even with your lots of talking points that can come out of this. I would think also that the perception of safety or lack of safety is also having an impact on our ability, the challenges that we're having trying to hire additional operators. And so are we communicating this to potential operators so that when they come in for their testing and so forth, or just their fact-finding things, that they understand that we're taking all of these steps? So that's a question that I have. And then the other thing is, it's been mentioned before, we are the best conveners that there are. And these issues that we're talking about are not just our issues, as we said over and over and over. So who are we convening? And this is a question right now. Who have we convened to talk more globally about the issue? Or
who has convened, that we are a part of that discussion, and how are we going to do that going forward? Because we talk about convening, but I'm not feeling a sense of this is how we are social services and the faith community and the schools and the police departments in our communities and so forth. Have we actually convened, and could we, or are we part of another one? Okay, and then I also, just back to what Councilmember Wolf said too, I did do a ride-along prior to COVID with the HAT team, and I really encourage you to find a way to offer that to anybody who wants. And it doesn't just have to be the HAT team. It would be interesting to do a HAT team ride-along, and also to do one during the day and see the differences and the challenges and the different perspectives. And I think, I'm sure that there's huge interest here. I know a number of us did it before COVID, and we're planning to do more, but it's hugely beneficial to be out there and to witness and to see and to feel and to experience with all of our senses what our police officers are going through, and really get a deeper understanding of how we can be helpful and supportive of what's going on. But thank you for what you're doing, and this is great.
Thank you, Molly. We're at time, but our favorite council member is.
Quick question. It's not a question, it's a really quick statement. It was in my notes before. This really builds on something Councilmember Johnson said, what Councilmember Cummings just said, I think. Wes said some of this as well. But it has to do with this sort of regional leadership piece. And you can say convening, and that's a word, right? And you know what it means, but it's really exercising that regional leadership. I thought it was really interesting to hear Sergeant Mohamed tell the story of the social worker who could only work up to the Ramsey County border. And then presumably get off the bus or train and go the other way or something. That's just not how things work, especially if you're talking about things like unsheltered, people experiencing unsheltered. By definition, they're not recognizing boundaries, right? And so this regional leadership piece, and that, maybe this is the issue, safety, everyone's interested in it, transit safety, it needs to improve or we're not gonna have a transit system. And so I just think it's bolder than I feel like we usually are as a body, and I just think leadership matters here. Thank you.
I would second that, and I appreciate your tremendous leadership. You're everywhere. I don't even know if you sleep at night with all the work you're called to do.
He said John's drinking sangria.
But I would say that I don't feel like this body, as a body, is called upon enough to meet with other bodies, like the summit. We can do those things. And I know you're all doing it every day as staff, but there's a role for us to meet with our counterparts. Even just having 2 commissioners here the other day talking about the blue line was fantastic. And then the side conversations after the meeting about other stuff you're trying to do, because we haven't really been able to meet with these people. So whenever we can, I think the body should be doing it in addition to the chair, although he's doing a great job. But, I feel COVID, of course, sidelined everybody, but I'd be very interested in any kind of meeting at that level. We talk about regional concepts. I have yet to have many, regional meetings about the topics we're speaking about tonight that Councilmember Cummings mentioned. So I think if you want to leverage us that way, I'd jump right in.
Great thoughts. Wes, did you have one?
I just want to mention real quickly, and I really appreciate the conversation about regional leadership. It's really what is important to our future. But that's one thing, the point I want to make is, for Metro Transit, I'll just speak to Metro Transit, it's not just about the investment in making in safety and security today and making it a better customer experience today. If you look at our build-out plan with the D line, the E line, the F line, the G line, the H line, gold, purple, blue, green, you go down that, and it's all by 2028.
It's all happening.
Soon.
So it's not just an investment for today. It's really, this is about how do we position ourselves for what our aspirations are with respect to a transit system going forward. So thank you for giving me that.
And paying for it.
There's that. As I said, this is really a great conversation. I want to, start by thanking Lesley and your wonderful team. Thank each and every one of you. And Interim Chief, thank you for what you're doing. We have a lot of work ahead of us. I think this is a call of action for us to be rising up and to be regional leaders, either summits or forums. We have to do our part, and we're gonna continue this conversation. So, even though we're 5 minutes over, it was worth it, and we keep going. We cannot leave until we actually have a motion to adjourn.